A nation waging war on crime. A prison built to house the world's deadliest men. And thousands locked up, many without trial. This is the shocking reality inside El Salvador's mega prison. But what if what you've seen is only the surface? What if there's a darker, deeper story that's being buried under government pride and international silence? Welcome back to Mystery Junkie. Today, we're pulling back the steel doors of El Salvador's most terrifying facility and exposing what the world wasn't supposed to see. For years, El Salvador was locked in a war against its own streets. MS-13 and Barrio 18. Two of the most violent gangs in the Americas turned entire neighborhoods into war zones. Extortion, assassinations, public executions, they ruled not with politics, but with terror. By 2022, the country had reached its tipping point. A single weekend saw over 80 murders. President Nayib Bukele, a young leader with a populist grip on power, responded with a drastic move. He declared a state of exception. Constitutional rights were suspended overnight. Thousands were arrested, many without warrants, without lawyers, and without evidence. To house the growing number of detainees, Bukele needed something massive, something terrifying. So he built Cecot. Cecot stands for Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, but it might as well mean hell on earth. Completed in early 2023, this mega prison is one of the largest incarceration facilities on the planet, capable of housing up to 40,000 inmates. It sits in a remote valley far from El Salvador cities, a place built not for rehabilitation, but total control. There are no conjugal visits, no family calls, no sunlight reaches most cells, and the inmates? Most of them are barefoot, shirtless, and shackled. When Bukele posted a now-viral video showing inmates being marched in rows, crouching with their hands behind their heads, packed into cells like sardines, the internet split in two. Some saw justice. Others saw a human rights nightmare. Under the state of exception, the rules changed, and justice was no longer blind. It was selective. Anyone suspected of gang affiliation could be detained indefinitely. Tattoos, clothing style, even just being in the wrong neighborhood could lead to arrest. Thousands of innocent people, students, street vendors, even children, were swept up in mass raids. Families were left without answers. Mothers waited outside jails with food that would never be accepted. And the media? Most of it was silenced or forced to toe the government line. It was a dystopian shift, but one that came with rising popularity for Bukele, because crime rates were dropping. Or so they said. From the outside, Cecot looks like an iron fortress. But inside, it's a psychological war zone. Reports leaked by whistleblowers and international watchdogs describe horrifying conditions. Cells designed for 100 holding 200. Zero mattresses. No medical care for the sick. Inmates forced to drink from the same water they defecate near. Those who disobey guards are allegedly beaten. Solitary confinement is common, sometimes for months. And rehabilitation programs, non-existent. One guard anonymously told a journalist, "This isn't a prison. It's a warehouse for the unwanted." There are no names inside Cecot, only numbers, and only silence. Here's something most people don't know. The United States quietly plays a part in this machine. In recent years, the U.S. has deported dozens of suspected gang members back to El Salvador. Many were sent directly to Cecot, without trial, without appeal, and some weren't even gang members at all. Take Kilmar Abrego Garcia, for example, a man deported from the U.S. despite no serious criminal history. He vanished into the system, his family left without answers. Human rights groups asked, is the U.S. outsourcing its dirty work? Are we enabling mass incarceration in the name of security? The silence from Washington is deafening. President Bukele boasts that the streets are safer. That gang violence has dropped by over 80%. That tourists are returning. But what cost? What happens when fear is weaponized? When prisons become political tools instead of centers for justice? And when people cheer for cruelty simply because it's not happening to them? The world applauds El Salvador's crime drop, but ignores the 25,000 plus people held without charges, and the hundreds who have died in custody. Their deaths labeled as unknown causes. Is this justice? Or just a new form of oppression, painted over with the colors of reform? Bukele is a master of social media. He posts videos of the prison. He calls gang members terrorists. He wears bulletproof vests and stages public victories. But what you don't see is the censorship. Independent journalists who speak out are intimidated. Foreign investigators are denied access. And the families of prisoners are too afraid to speak. The narrative is tightly controlled. The villain is clear. And the public, hungry for justice, even if it's fake. This isn't just a prison story. It's a case study in how narratives can justify almost anything. For every video of inmates marching barefoot, there's a mother who hasn't heard from her son in over a year. There's a sister who knows her brother wasn't in a gang, but can't prove it. There's a lawyer who's been denied access to their client. And for every claim of peace, there's a funeral for a man who never got a trial. The most haunting thing about Cecot isn't what's shown, it's what's hidden. The world is watching, barely. Some praise Bukele as a visionary. Others call him a dictator in disguise. But no one can deny this. El Salvador is testing the limits of what a modern government can do when fear is on their side. Can a nation erase crime by locking up everyone remotely connected to it? Can you build peace through oppression? Or is this a powder keg waiting to explode? As of now, Cecot stands strong. But history has never been kind to prisons built on silence. What you just saw isn't just a story about El Salvador. It's a warning. Because once you normalize the stripping of rights, once you cheer on cruelty because it brings results, you don't just lose freedom for criminals. You lose it for everyone. Maybe today, it's gang members. But tomorrow, it could be students, journalists, you. And maybe the biggest prison is the one built in our minds when we accept that this is the only way to fix things. So ask yourself, how much justice are you willing to give up in exchange for peace? And what if that peace was just an illusion? Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop asking what they don't want you to know. So now that we've walked through the prison gates of Cecot and stared into the cold, bare cells where men are stripped not just of freedom, but of identity, what does it really mean? At first glance, it's easy to say that El Salvador is doing what had to be done. A country gripped by gang violence finally stood up and fought back. A president took action when no one else dared to. And streets that were once ruled by MS-13 are now safer, calmer, and open again to the people. But here's the thing. Sometimes, when you fight monsters too long, you become one yourself. Cecot isn't just a prison. It's a symbol of something bigger, of what happens when justice turns into revenge, when efficiency replaces empathy, and when fear becomes policy. Think about this. Over 70,000 people have been arrested since the state of exception began. That's nearly 1 in every 200 citizens. And most of them never saw a lawyer, never got a trial, never had a chance to prove their innocence. They were labeled criminals by suspicion alone. And once that label sticks, it rarely comes off. Bukele built more than a prison. He built a narrative, one where everyone inside Cecot is a monster and everyone outside is safe because of it. But reality is never that simple. What about the teenagers pulled off buses because they had tattoos? What about the fathers who disappeared from their jobs and never came home? What about the bodies found inside cells with no explanation? Human rights aren't a luxury for the privileged. They're a shield for the vulnerable. Because the second you make it okay to throw one person's rights away, you make it okay to do it again and again. And here's the scariest part. People are cheering this on. They see order, not the price it took to get it. They see safety, not the silence of the victims left behind. But history always has a long memory, and it has never looked kindly on leaders who built peace with fear, or prisons with no doors out. Now ask yourself, if this happened in your country, would you be safe? Would your brother, your cousin who dresses differently, your friend who once lived in a tough neighborhood? Cecot didn't just lock away gang members. It locked away the messy truth of what happens when power goes unchecked. When leaders don't need courts to decide who's guilty, it's easy to sleep peacefully when the prisons are far away. But one day, the line between criminal and enemy gets blurred. And when that happens, anyone can be next. So this isn't just about El Salvador. It's about all of us. and what we're willing to accept in the name of safety. Because once you let fear win, once you start believing that mass arrests, torture, and indefinite detainment are necessary evils, you've already lost the battle for justice. Stay informed, stay human, and never stop questioning the systems that ask you to trade liberty for control. Because no prison is ever just made of steel and concrete. Sometimes, the strongest bars are the ones built by silence.